Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. If I could have your attention, I'm Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this, our November Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. We live in interesting times. This morning's Washington Times has as its lead story a story about Michael Steele, the lieutenant governor of Maryland, who is moving toward a U.S. Senate race there next year. The first paragraph of the article reads, "Black Democratic leaders in Maryland say that racially tinged attacks against Lieutenant Governor Michael Steele in his bid for the U.S. Senate are fair because he's a conservative Republican." And among the things which they think are fair are that they pelt him, some people come in and pelt him during campaign appearances with Oreo cookies. And they call him an Uncle Tom. And they depicted him on a liberal weblog as a black-faced minstrel. And on another website, they have him pictured under the, with the caption, "Eyes simple Sambo and eyes running for the big house." We really do live in interesting times. You can purchase a copy of this morning's presentation or any number of other Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast right across from the elevator. Our studios will gladly provide you with as many of these tapes as you'd like for $15 a piece. I want to express my thanks to the donors who are here. You are making possible incredible things. This is a spectacular record year for the Leadership Institute. So far in 2005, the Institute has trained 4,799 students in 231 different seminars and training programs. And we are quite certain that in contrast to last year's record enrollment of 3,800, this year we will exceed 5,000 students, a 30% increase. And other programs are booming as well. We've placed an enormous number, 101 job seekers through our employment placement program, et cetera. You have before you our 2005 school schedule for the remaining schools. We're working now on next year's schedule, which I trust we will be able to give you next month. Take a moment, please, to review the schools and consider attending some of our programs or sending conservatives who want to win, whom you happen to know. I know some conservatives who are never happy when we win. They think that proves that something is wrong somewhere because we are winning, but that's not our belief here at the Leadership Institute. I now introduce to you Becky Turco, who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Becky is a native Floridian, attended the University of Florida and got her degree there in English literature. Last year in the fall, she worked as college coordinator for the Republican National Committee and organized student volunteers and activists during the months leading up to the presidential election. In January of this year, she began work here at the Institute at the Campus Leadership Program, and she serves now as director of the Institute's flagship school, our Youth Leadership School. Becky?
Thank you. Would you please bow with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your goodness toward us. Lord, who are we that you'd be mindful of us? But we thank you, God, for the blessings that you've bestowed on us and for giving us life, Lord, for enabling us to live in this great country. Lord, of all the times in the history of the earth when we could have been here, God, the fact that you've placed us here at this time, for such a time as this, Lord, we are grateful, Lord. And so we ask that you continue to just guide us and bless us as we go about your business, Lord. And we ask that you would show us the way to go, Lord. Show us in what ways we can bring glory to your name here as we work on earth, God. I just thank you so much for this time that you've given us together, and I pray that you'll bless this food to our bodies. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I introduce to you Dana Stevens. He's going to give us an update on the activities of our grassroots program here at the Institute, which is our largest program, our largest training program. Dana got his political start with Congressman Jack Kingston of Georgia, and he joined Congressman Kingston's office in 2002 and gained valuable experience in the legislative process and the political process. He then worked as a fundraiser for FOJK, Friends of Jack Kingston. Dana has worked on campaigns ranging from county board to U.S. Congress. In the recent election cycle of 2004, he spent his time working with Dwayne Sand for Congress in North Dakota. He now works for the Leadership Institute as the director of our grassroots marketing. He was born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, and he studied political science and graduated from Hampton-Sydney College.
Thank you, Morton. Can everybody hear me in the back? I'm having to lean over a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. I've been tasked this morning with talking a little bit about the Leadership Institute's grassroots department in the past year we have had. And the primary thing I'd like to do is actually introduce two new team members. One is Bill Meyerling, and the second is Dave DeZock. Bill and Dave have hit the ground running. We've really had a busy fall, and they started and just have added so much to our department, and none of these numbers and none of these goals could have been reached without them. Bill's actually working on building coalitions with the Hispanic community. Dave comes to us. He worked with me on Dwayne Sand's race, and he actually comes to us with a lot of campaign experience, and he's building bridges up in New England so we can get up there and train conservative leaders. And actually, you guys can sit down. I appreciate it. Without them, none of these trainings we've had this year could be possible. We've actually had a number of trainings. We had one 100-plus person training in Ohio, where actually the next governor of Ohio, Ken Blackwell, came and spoke. As well as trainings, we've had 7 in Illinois. We've actually had training in the governor's mansion in Nevada, as well as having a training in the Empire State Building. And just to keep it brief, I know I'm supposed to keep it brief, but our numbers this year, just compared to last year, we trained 1,626 students in 2004. This year, through the month of October, we've trained 1,891 students. And we've actually had 44 schools through October, and we conducted 44 schools last year. We are projected to increase our numbers in the grassroots department at 32%. So that wraps up our grassroots summary. I appreciate it, and I will turn the mic back over.
Thank you very much, Dana. And now to introduce our outstanding speaker, I introduce John Tate. John is Vice President for Membership here at the Institute, and in this role he heads up a department of our staff who contact and visit supporters nationwide and show them specially targeted programs about what the Institute is running. Before joining us here at the Institute, John spent 14 years with the National Right to Work Committee, serving as Vice President there from 1998 to 2004. And as Vice President, he oversaw all the state and federal lobbying efforts, public relations, and affiliated state and federal PACs for the National Right to Work Committee, and he oversaw their direct mail and telemarketing operation that raised more than $23 million to combat big labor's coercive power over workers. In 1996, John was the Republican nominee for Congress in Virginia's 2nd District. Prior to his work at Right to Work, John was executive director of the Right to Work organizations in California and Delaware, and was legislative director of the U.S. Defense Committee, a lobbying organization. John is that was a Freudian slip, John. John is a longtime political activist here in Virginia and in national politics. He was chairman of the Rules Committee at the 1994 Virginia Republican State Convention and has worked on numerous local, state, and national campaigns in the Commonwealth and around the country. John began attending Leadership Institute schools in 1980 and has taught at many of our schools through the years. He's a sought-after speaker on winning political technology and grassroots mobilization at every level. He's a graduate of the University of Virginia with a BA degree in history. John and his wife, Kathy, live in Bristow, Virginia, where they homeschool and are raising their 5 children, Lauren, Joe, Jake, Jared, and John Robert. How come Lauren didn't have a name starting with the letter J? She's a girl. Well, there's Janine, there's Jane, Helen Jane Blackwell, I get it. Here's John Tate.
Thank you, Morton. We have to be brief, but there are a few things I need to say about Congressman Joe Wilson. I first met him in, I guess it was 2001, when he was running for the special election in South Carolina's 2nd District. He called me at the National Right to Work Committee. He had received his candidate survey, and he called because he wanted us to know he was sending it in 100%, but also that he was a member of the National Right to Work Committee, a proud member, and we could publicize that fact if we wanted. This told me 2 things about him right away. He was a committed conservative, and he understood the importance of grassroots politics, which is probably just as important. Since being elected to Congress from South Carolina, he has worked tirelessly for a National Right to Work Act. He's the lead sponsor of the bill, and he's one of the only members of Congress I've ever seen who actually goes to the floor and buttonholes other congressmen. He and his wife, Roxanne, have 4 sons, 3 of whom serve in the U.S. military. He's a graduate of the Leadership Institute's Effective Television Techniques Workshop and has recruited other congressmen to come to that school as well. He's also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, also very active, or was very active in the Boy Scouts. In fact, when I took my son's group down there, Congressman Wilson spent, 4 hours with our children, gave them a private tour of the Capitol. He's a great guy. And just as important, personnel is policy, and Joe Wilson has one of the best staffs on Capitol Hill. Eric Dell is here, and they're friendly and effective. I give you Congressman Joe Wilson.
John, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and ladies and gentlemen, it's just an honor to be here with you, and to me, it's somewhat of a dream come true, because I graduated from Washington Lee University, and I'll have to say the year in 1969, and at that time I just remember we were truly in an uphill fight. It was very difficult to identify the opportunities that we could have for conservatives, and particularly as a Republican from South Carolina, I knew the future that I had. It was to be in the back of the bus, but it was my view, with good people like Morton, Helen, what vision they have to have created the Institute. And I'd like to point out that as you look at the upcoming calendar, this is real world getting involved in the process, making a difference. This is not just some situation of programs that are coming up that might be of interest, that are esoteric and again moving the deck chairs on the Titanic. This is truly meaningful information, providing opportunities for young people and people of age to get involved in the political process to make a difference. And then if that's not enough, I love this, to see the back about more programs for conservatives who want to win. Indeed, when I came in, I saw the Kriebel room, and it reminded me of the opportunity I had 15 years ago this summer. I went with Dr. Kriebel to Sofia, Bulgaria, with Paul Weyrich, and through the Kriebel Institute, the Free Congress Foundation, I had the opportunity to speak to the newly elected members of the National Assembly in Bulgaria. Who would imagine that here in June I had been an election observer recommended by Lee Atwater to go with the International Republican Institute to observe the first free elections in Bulgaria since the 1930s. And now I went back with Dr. Kriebel, and how incredible. Even 15 years ago, if I told you that Bulgaria would become a free market economy, a thriving democracy, a member of NATO, 15 years ago, that would have been grounds for commitment. And so there's no way that could happen. But yet 2 years ago, I was on the lawn of the White House when Bulgaria, with Prime Minister Simeon Sachs-Kobrygatha, was admitted into NATO. 2 weeks ago, I had the extraordinary opportunity to host President Georgy Parvanov of Bulgaria, and we were able to thank him and his country for sending troops to serve in Afghanistan. I actually got to meet with the commander of Bulgarian forces in Kabul. In Iraq, Bulgaria has sent nearly 500 troops to serve with our troops. It is the first voluntary providing of troops by Bulgaria in their 1,200 years of existence. And now they cannot wait. They're waiting for the forward deployment of NATO forces to have bases in Bulgaria. It will be the first voluntary placement of foreign military troops in their country in 1,200 years. And so as I tell you that I'm optimistic, I can specifically cite because of my association with the Republic of Bulgaria, but again, going back to when I was in undergraduate school in the western part of the state, in the Valley, at Washington Lee, at that time, again, it was somewhat bleak. During most of my period in college, Lyndon Johnson was president. That would make it bleak. But now, look, we should just be grateful that conservatives are winning. As I went back home to law school in South Carolina, we had not reached double digits yet in the House and Senate in terms of members of the General Assembly. We had not had a Republican governor in over 100 years, and the prospects were we wouldn't have another one for another 100 years. Times have changed. And I really use South Carolina as a composite because it's similar to what's happened to Virginia, almost identical to what's happened to Florida and Texas. Now in my home state, we have a Republican governor running for re-election next year with the prospects very bright, Mark Sanford, of his success. We have in the state Senate, when I was elected in 1984, there were 6 Republicans on the back row, and we were so excited. We'd never had that many, and there were 40 Democrats. And every now and then they would recognize us if we raised our hand high enough and jumped out of the chair where we could get attention from the Lieutenant Governor. It's changed. It's now 26 Republicans and 20 Democrats, and with redistricting, the Democratic Party last year agreed to permanent minority status. So that very thoughtful on their part. And in the House of Representatives, we now in South Carolina have 74 Republicans and 49 Democrats. But very important, and this is where the Leadership Institute has come in, many of the people who are serving in the General Assembly of South Carolina have had training here. And these are very bright, many of them young people who are making a difference in our state, making a difference in our nation. And who would have ever dreamed that now that we have a majority of state legislators in the United States? We have a majority of governors. Obviously, the majority in the House and Senate, and many of us, I never anticipated there would be a Republican majority in the U.S. House of Representatives, much less that we would keep it. And I think if we work hard, we can build on it and have a long-term success record. And that gets to the issue that I was asked to come speak about, and that is success in our defense policy. And I'm very grateful to be on the Armed Services Committee. It was identified that I have served 31 years in the Army National Guard. I like to tell people that I'm not just serving in office, I'm living it. And the way I'm living it, and I'll pass these around, is that my oldest son, indeed, is a captain in the Army National Guard, and he has just gotten back in February from serving for a year in Iraq. And I have been to Iraq 5 times. I want you to know that I believe that substantial progress is being made. When I tell you that, it's somewhat obvious that progress is being made with the elections that occurred on October the 15th. And it's amazing how the other side is not held to what they say. We were told by the other side that the people of Iraq were not sufficiently sophisticated enough to develop a constitution. During the Memorial Day break, I actually met with the chairman of the Constitutional Drafting Committee in Baghdad, and I was really inspired. It just would, here in the state of Thomas Jefferson, it was inspiring to meet people who were trying to replicate the creation of a freedom in their country. And indeed, they were able to come up with a constitution. Not only did they come up with a constitution, but 63% of the people in the nation voted on it. We would love next Tuesday for 63%, if they're the right ones, to come out and vote. But 63% is unheard of. Additionally, we're not talking about small numbers. It's 9.8 million people voted on October the 15th. These people voted despite the fact that they were told they were going to be killed if they voted. They said they'd be identified because they would have ink on their fingers and again be marked for death and extermination. But they voted. And then I have to tell you, because we know how contrary people that we serve with are, and independent-minded, can you imagine that 79% of the people voted in favor of the Constitution? That's amazing. I have to tell you that when we have referendum issues in South Carolina, it's always plus or minus 1 or 2%. And so so the thought of proposing a constitution and getting 79% is utterly startling, and I think we should be looking at that as an indication. I could go through statistic after statistic, but what I'd rather do is point out to you that I brought a brochure from the Department of Defense, and it goes specifically down what's going on in Iraq, and it's what you would expect what's going on in Iraq. We are training security forces, that would be through the Ministry of Interior Police, through the Ministry of Defense, their military, to be able to create a civil society so that indeed, as the President has, the perfect exit strategy, we exit when we win, when we complete the mission. That's hardly a startling discovery, but the whole purpose of this is to protect American families. We found out, and it's amazing, I conclude every speech on Capitol Hill with God bless our troops, and we will not forget September the 11th. The reason I say that, and I know that sounds startling to you in this room, but on this side of the House of Representatives, September the 11th didn't even occur. They have completely forgotten it. It was not an event of any significance, and I truly was, as Tony Blair said, I was transformed. I know my constituents were transformed. We now understand that conflict can come to the United States, and so we must do all that we can to stop the ability of terrorists to be able to train. And these are not people just in a cave. These are multimillionaires in the cave who are there not by choice. They would much prefer to be in palaces, but these are extremely wealthy people who are planning the demise of our civilization. The specifics of what's being done, I really want you to look at the number of troops being trained. Is now over 206,000. This document is actually out of date, but it takes time to train troops. I've been to Kirkuk. where the troops are being trained. I've been to the police training facility in Jordan, where thousands of very brave Iraqis are coming forward to be trained. The best example about the police is that in a totalitarian system, as Saddam Hussein had, the role of the police department was to catch someone and then beat them until they acknowledged that they had done the crime of which they were accused. And so it goes without saying, we have to retrain these people into community policing and in what you would expect in a free and democratic society. That's going to take time. Additionally, with the military forces, I know that we've got even 1 or 2 retired Marines here, Lou. But we've got people who understand that it takes time for training of military personnel. My oldest son in the National Guard, I know his training. My second son is my dear predecessor, late Floyd Spence, convinced him to go in the Navy. He's a Navy doctor. I stay in touch with him and learn about how our military is being trained. It takes extraordinary time. My third son just got back from spending a month in Egypt on a peacekeeping exercise. He's a second lieutenant in the Signal Corps, Army National Guard. On his way to law school, we need more attorneys. And then I'm very proud of my fourth son, and I appreciate John pointing out about Boy Scouting. My fourth son has just completed his Eagle Scout qualifications, and part of that he had to identify his future. And Lou, you will like this. His future is to get a ROTC scholarship to go to Washington and Lee or possibly to Clemson University, and then become an engineer and serve in the Marines. And I don't know how this happened, but the training that that is necessary. The units that Saddam Hussein had were really like marching units. They were to intimidate people around the world how well Saddam's army could walk between the cross bayonets, those swords. They truly, and the equipment they had, putting that in perspective, was Soviet equipment. There was something about that equipment. It didn't work. And so it's going to take time to train on modern equipment, to give the proper equipment to the Iraqi forces. We really had a bad situation initially when I was there, and that is that the Iraqi forces didn't have the body armor. And so people were saying, y'all come with us. Well, our troops obviously had body armor and were prepared. And so then the reports came back that the Iraqis were not properly motivated. It wasn't a question of motivation. They didn't have the equipment. And so now they do have the equipment. And so we can expect more, and I believe it's coming. I want you to know, too, because you won't read about this in the paper, that thanks to Congressman Mark Green, we have a caucus called Victory in Iraq Caucus. I like to remind people that the name of Victory in Iraq actually came from Barry Goldwater. And so on my desk I have a book, Why Not Victory, by Barry Goldwater. We've been through this. There are several people in this room old enough to remember, not many, that we went through the Cold War, where Ronald Reagan had a vision of freedom for persons in Eastern and Central Europe and Asia. We now can see that victory did come about through peace through strength. The same abuse that our current president is receiving is the abuse that Ronald Reagan received. So it's almost amazing the same arguments are being used. But yet I am just confident that we can persevere, and just as we won the Cold War after being told we couldn't, we will prevail in this, but we've got to, because indeed the security of the American people is at risk. These people have made it very clear that their intent is to destroy the United States. You know, in 1979, in front of the embassy in Tehran, and the sign has not changed, they carried signs, "Death to America." That's the same sign they carry today. It doesn't even need translation. It's very clear what it means. A final point I'd like to make is, to help you keep up with what's going on, at www.defendamerica.mil, there's a weekly status report from the State Department on the creation of a democratic society, civil society. I'll leave this with Mort. The creation of an economy. I bet none of you knew that there's a stock exchange in Baghdad. Business is being created. It's just extraordinary, the facts and information that you can receive indicating progress being made as a civil society is being created. And I have a slight problem today. The good news is the Republican conference at 9 o'clock is having a special conference. We're going to have a 3-hour round-robin discussion of planning our agenda for the balance of the year and next year. I want you to realize that what a difference this week is over last week. Last week, indeed, we all had a cloud over us, if not a thunderstorm and a cloud burst. But this week, I think that we can really be proud that so much is back on track. And so I'm very grateful that with the Republican leadership I'm so honored to be serving with, that we'll be getting back on track. And another resource I want you to know is right here, Eric Dell, who's going to be yelling at me in just a minute to leave. My Chief of Staff, he's available to each of you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. John is correct. But in conclusion, I just want to thank you so much for being here. You're making such a difference. Our nation, I think, is on such a better track because of the people that you're helping train and provide to make a difference for a better America for all of us and a safer America for our families. And so thank you, and God bless each of you.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Before you leave, I want to present a little token of our appreciation. This is an Adam Smith tie from the Leadership Institute. And thank you for excellent remarks. And I know that you have to go, and I appreciate it.
I apologize for the rush, but again, this is a good sign that your people that you spend so much time and effort to get elected are indeed making a difference by working together. And we may be under assault, but we shall be victorious. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us on Wednesday, December 7th. Our next breakfast will feature political analyst, educator, journalist, expert, consultant, Dr. Ron Fauché, who created Campaigns and Elections magazine. He started off in Louisiana. He has come to Washington and made quite a reputation for himself, and he very generously offers time frequently to teach at our schools. He's a terrific expert, and he's going to give us a political analysis looking toward next year. Those of you who are new to the Institute and would like a tour of our building, if you would meet here at the podium at the conclusion of the breakfast. The tour will start almost immediately. Development Associate Christy Meade will give you a tour. Christy, there she is. Come on up here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming, and we are adjourned.